In early February 1987, Alan and Debbie Tallman brought home a $100 bunk bed they bought at a used furniture store. They put it together and stored it in the basement. But the night they moved it upstairs to their daughter's bedroom and the girls slept in it, it marked the beginning of 9 months of horrors for the entire family. In a story straight out of a horror film itself, or maybe not quite a horror film, we explore the dangers of buying used furniture, in today's case, of the cursed bunk beds. Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. When I think of Halloween drinks, I automatically put Jello shots into that category, I guess. But did you know that their history dates back to the mid-20th century? When alcohol was prohibited in the United States military, an American singer-songwriter by the name of Tom Lehrer was serving in the armed forces. Tom, being a quick thinker, decided to get past this rule by redefining alcohol as a food to be consumed at his Christmas celebration. After some trial and error, he added vodka to orange Jello, and ever since, college students have been grateful for his genius invention. And if you want to put it in poetry or song form, look no further than the 2009 song Jello Shots by Luke Ski with a verse about Tom. The folks still remember it. It was late December of '56, that was the case. Serving in the Army, Tom's planned Christmas party, no spirits allowed on the base. Sneak it in, you may ask, in a small metal flask? No way, because those sergeants could smell a tin. So do what you oughta, use vodka, not water, inside a dessert made of gelatin. Jello shots are a surprisingly versatile little treat. You can use pretty much any kind of alcohol you'd like, and you can use pretty much any kind of Jello. If you want them sugar-free, go for it. Today's recipe is one of my favorites, and yes, I've used many. Usually I do Halloween colors, but I wanted cherry-flavored shots, so they'll be blood red. Ooh, spooky, right? Maybe. For the cocktail, shot, take a 3-ounce box of gelatin powder of your choice. I used cherry, like I said, and mix with 1 cup of boiling water. Stir for about 2 minutes until all the powder is combined. Add 1 cup of alcohol of your choice. I used whipped cream vodka and stir to combine. Fill 2-ounce plastic shot cups with the mixture and refrigerate until set, which is probably about 3 to 4 hours. Right before serving, top with some whipped cream and, if you want, a cherry. For the mocktail, shot, you could use fake vodka, but I'll be honest, I think that's a waste of a lot of the fake vodka. That stuff is expensive. I honestly would just make the Jello as is, top it with whipped cream and the cherry, and keep them well separated from the alcoholic ones if you're having an all ages Halloween bash. You can't tell the difference until you eat them. Debbie and Alan Tallman were a young couple with 3 young children when they moved into their newly bought ranch home at 415 Larrabee Street in November of 1986. They bought the house through the state's Farmers Home Administration Rural Housing Program, and they thought this was their dream home. They believed that they would live there for a very long time. Horicon, Wisconsin was a small farming town of 3,800 people. It was a safe and prosperous little town. Debbie was a housewife and mother, and Alan was a shift supervisor in a manufacturing plant. They were reported as being credible and responsible citizens. They had never had anything supernatural happen to them, and they'd never even really thought about ghosts. They were more the church on Sunday types, if you know what I mean. Knowing that their young girls would soon be sharing a bedroom, they bought a set of bunk beds at a local secondhand store. They paid $253, which, if you ask me, is like what a new set of bunk beds should cost, but I guess I'm not buying a lot of bunk beds. Anyway, they put the beds assembled in the basement as they weren't needed just yet. Their youngest wasn't even 2. But pretty soon after the beds were assembled, within weeks, the children started getting sick, something that wasn't normal for them. Sometimes all 3 kids would be sick enough to need doctor's visits in the same week. That was only the beginning. In late May 1987, Debbie and Alan moved the bunk bed into their daughter's shared bedroom. That night, their son was sleeping in the room next door to the bunk bed. They tucked their son into bed and turned on the clock radio. That night, the clock radio took on a life of its own. The dial moved by itself, and the indicator went from one side of the radio to the other, all by itself. Understandably freaked out, the little boy ran to his parents in the living room and explained what had happened. But thinking the son was just, making things up, they took the radio away from him. A few weeks later, Alan would have his first paranormal experience. He was painting the walls in the basement, which, why are you doing that? Anyway, that's what he was doing, but he took a break to go upstairs and eat dinner. He set his paintbrush down, but when he went back downstairs, the brush was in the can with the handle side down. It's not something he would have done. Another time, a chair and suitcase appeared to move by themselves. Then, Alan and Debbie's daughter started seeing things. She was, remember, the one actually sleeping in the bunk bed. She talked about seeing a witch behind a door. She saw a lot of fire surrounding the witch. The parents, not wanting to scare their son, didn't mention it to him. But about a month later, he said he saw an old lady standing by his door glowing like fire. It was then that the Tallman family began to suspect that their house was haunted. Yeah, I'd say so. They approached their pastor, Wayne Dobratz, who felt the presence of evil in their house. He believed that whatever was affecting them was demonic. More on him later. Yeah. Meanwhile, the Tallmans are experiencing some serious haunting action. Doors randomly opening and closing. Voices called to them. Visions persisted and scared the dickens out of the children. At one point, Alan totally flipped his lid and started yelling at and challenging whatever was haunting the home to fight him. He would later say, quote, "I was afraid for my life. I was also very afraid for my family. I had visions of coming home from work and actually seeing my family destroyed, brutally murdered, or just laying there dead in the house." End quote. On January 7th, 1988, Alan came home from working the night shift around 2:00 a.m. Outside the garage, he heard a howling sound. When he went to investigate, he heard a voice, clear as day, come out of the howling that said, "Come here." He looked around the house to see if he could find where it came from, and it kept saying, "Come here, come here." When he got back to the front of the house, he looked at the garage door and saw a vision of it on fire. He ran inside, dropped his lunch pail and got his bearings, and then realized, oh my God, my garage is on fire. But when he went back out, the garage was fine. When he got back inside, he reached down to pick up his lunch pail and it hurled itself through the living room. At one point, the authorities opened an investigation to look for proof that the family's problems had not natural, non-supernatural sources. They searched for covert microphones and projectors. They looked for potential pranksters who might have something against Alan. Nothing odd was uncovered by the cops. Then, hordes of parapsychology specialists marched through the house looking for a psychic phenomenon as the cause. They likewise came up empty-handed, but they insisted that supernatural forces must be at play. Alan started sleeping in his daughter's room each night because they, naturally, could not sleep. One night, he saw a fog coming under the bedroom door and a voice that said, "You're dead." One night, a relative came over to watch the girls while Alan worked late, but that night the same vision appeared and terrified the relative. That night, they grabbed all the children and fled. Their dream house turned to nightmare fuel 9 months after the terror began. 2 weeks after they fled, the Tallmans had the bunk beds destroyed. Debbie said, quote, "The beds were buried Saturday in a landfill where nobody will ever build. They took them out there and plowed them under," end quote. Debbie and Alan put the house up for sale with the same agency they'd bought it from, relinquishing any equity that had been built up in it by the time they'd lived in it. That was almost a $13,000 loss in 2023 dollars. No small potatoes there. Under normal circumstances, the agency required borrowers to test the market before accepting title to homes. But exceptions were allowed, and one was allowed in this case. The family was so traumatized by the event that they would not participate In the reenactments portion of the Unsolved Mysteries episode they were featured in. Those of you Unsolved Mysteries fans know that they like to have the actual family members participate in the reenactments when they can. The Tallmans did not want them to use the children's real names. They did their interviews with their faces hidden. By the way, you can watch the high-quality acting from the Not Tallman family on YouTube, link in bio. It aired on the first ever Halloween episode of the classic television show in October of 1988. After the airing of the episode, it seems things got more interesting in Horicon, Wisconsin than the haunted house, or at least I think so. Neighbors from the beginning were outraged that Unsolved Mysteries had come to film on Larrabee Street in the first place. They were concerned with hordes of curiosity seekers and oglers coming to see the famous house and making their children less safe. And evidently, they had a reason to be upset. The hauntings themselves drew national attention even before the Unsolved Mysteries segment, and it caused such a commotion that at one point, the one-block street had to be barricaded to onlookers. 4 neighbors painted a banner declaring, quote, "Neighbors don't have a ghost of a chance for privacy," end quote, and posted it for someone to see. I don't know, the ghosts, whatever. Permission to film the segment had been granted by the new owners of the Tallman house, as they were singularly interested in dispelling rumors that they were also having haunting experiences. The new homeowner would say, quote, "My 2 kids, ages 4 and 8, are not scared of anything in the house," end quote. He did add, probably accurately, quote, "I'm probably going to have to buy extra Halloween candy," end quote. Not everyone hated the paranormal activity in the small town. The Horicon poltergeese were a new breed of waterfowl that had been featured on t-shirts marketed in Horicon, a town famous for the flocks of Canada geese that stopped by there every year on their way south. Coffins and skeletons started appearing in storefront windows in the downtown area, and a local bakery even made some ghost cupcakes. The Horicon mayor, Julius Marola, despite having not even seen the Unsolved Mysteries segment, called it exploitation. He said, quote, "It was a non-story in January, and it's a non-story today, but the press has tried to make it a story. I hope the publicity will go away and be the biggest non-story that ever hit Horicon," end quote. The Horicon police chief, Douglas Glauman, who had watched it, said, quote, "The segment seemed to parallel the results of our investigation and conversation with the homeowners. I was in the house but didn't see anything. The family was genuinely scared. Who's to say if these paranormal things occurred or didn't occur?" End quote. Several neighbors have been interviewed throughout the years and say, well, they don't believe that what happened to the Tallman family actually happened to the Tallman family. Karen Johannes, who lived 4 houses down on Larrabee Street, said, quote, "I lived here when the event was happening. It was questionable then. It's still questionable now," end quote. Debbie said, quote, "I think it's going to be a long time before things get back to normal. I still cannot sit at home at night and not be afraid of the dark," end quote. Yeah, I'd say no joke. The Tallmans experienced no further problems from the spirit world after they moved to Beaver Dam. They sold their story rights to Stanton and Lee Publishers, Inc. in Madison, Wisconsin. I have no idea if they got any money out of that, but apparently Unsolved Mysteries does pay, so they got some money there. And then there was the pastor. Wayne Dobratz, the associate pastor of St. Stephen's Lutheran Church in Horicon, used his experiences with the Tallmans to start speaking and writing about the dangers of the occult. He would say, quote, "Why flirt with the devil? He's very clever in what he brings into Christian homes," end quote. Wayne would travel around, show the Unsolved Mysteries segment, and then interpret the event. His theories included the bunk beds themselves may have been previously used for seances or Ouija board play. Another theory of his was that a babysitter or someone else introduced some occult forces, which could include Dungeons and Dragons, into the home, maybe even before the Tallmans even moved in. Have no fear, though. He and another Missouri Synod pastor conducted a house cleansing ritual after the Tallmans left, and that's why the new family experienced no hauntings. So what do you think? Do you believe in ghost stories, paranormal hauntings? If you do, you are in the boat of 46% of Americans, a number that has continued to increase as the share of Americans belonging to church congregations has fallen. What's the connection there? And has your belief about the existence of ghosts changed at any point in your life? Author Joseph Baker says, quote, "Religion and supernatural belief tend to go up in times of what we would call existential crisis or more existential perils," end quote. And Victorian biographer Emily Midorikawa says, quote, "A belief in the paranormal maybe doesn't seem as much of a stretch when we think about all the things we're interacting with all the time that might as well be a kind of magic for all the understanding we have of them," end quote. Maybe it was all in their heads. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you made and consumed a fair amount of Jello shots as you listened to today's episode. They'll have to tide you over because next week is our skipped week. Maybe next year I'll have to do all weeks of October. Let me know what you think. Shoot a comment in the YouTube, or send me an email. Don't know where to find all that stuff? It's all at www.capersandcocktails.com. Yes, spell out the "and," or you can just check the description box. In 2 weeks, a story that might bother some of your consumerism conscience. Sorry. Well, I'm actually not sorry. But get the ingredients to make yourself a pumpkin old-fashioned. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And remember, there are always alternatives to, you know what? You can't help it if you get haunted. Just let it ride.